Hey everyone, I did a chapter 9 summary from the book Coercion and its Fallout. Learning through avoidance was the chapter. So, in the introduction, author talks about how laboratory subjects learn from shocks until it learns to press the avoidance lever. Otherwise, just sitting still can be punishing. The same thing can be said to the children of parents who always practice punishment. The children only behave at home because nothing else is safe. If they practice punishment everywhere, very often the kids learn to pretty much not do anything. We are motivated by avoidance. So some students work for A's while most students just avoid F's. Churches, they threaten with hellfire if you don't, practice their beliefs or believe in what they believe in. And in order to avoid, I guess, the punishment of hellfire, we abide by the church's practices, follow their beliefs. Governments often avoid economic difficulties. Workers often avoid getting fired, especially when your boss has a position of power. We use avoidance for all aspects of our life. So, for academic skills, family interactions, sexual and social relationships, politics, moral values, business associations, abiding to the law, and etc. So, what else goes along with avoidance? The very first part of this section of the chapter says keep your nose out of trouble. So, exploring, playing, exercising, and even eating and drinking are no longer safe options for the laboratory subjects. If you don't do anything, you will not get a shock. But however, if you do something, the threat of punishment is too great, and they just sit there and do nothing. And we unfortunately learn that constant threats and fear of punishment can destroy living beings' potential for learning and growth. So, punishment also creates confined and narrow existences, so various cultures try to counter it by promoting a glorious afterlife, as the book calls it. So the conclusion of this section is pretty much that coercion results in not only learning to survive, we no longer just live and enjoy life, we just live to survive. And negativity and inflexibility end up being your main character traits if you learn to live the life of avoidance. So no is safer than yes when you live this life. And for example, in a job, avoidance of blame becomes the goal to not get fired or promoted, but not innovation or productivity, which is what it should be. So terrorism is one of the most dangerous forms of coercion because they are subject to life. These people who engage in these, terrorist acts, they are subject to life-threatening repression, like all day, every day, and they cope. I guess cope with the situation is they force others to press the avoidance lever by threatening to take everything they have. So all they know is repression, so that's what they give out to the world. What makes them really dangerous is that they believe that they have a glorious afterlife, so they behave like they have little to lose, often destroying themselves in the process of carrying out their punishments. Aside from terrorism, we take part in social coercion by keeping those unlucky enough to have been impoverished in line. We impoverish ourselves in the process. So, escaping a situation after it shocks us is more controlling and more effective than successful avoidance. So, we wait until it hurts to leave a situation. One major example that the book uses is the health system. It is based on cure rather than prevention. So, when we are sick, we go to the doctor. We don't go for tests or blood work when we're well. We can learn avoidance by following the rules, even if we did not experience the feared event. So the hot stove example that they use, if a child wants to touch a hot stove or is almost going to touch a hot stove, the warning from the parent should be enough for the child not to touch it. But however, if the child gets a small taste of, touching the hot stove, even if it's not a full-blown burn, that little experience will be enough for him to avoid that in the future. So if we experience a minor version of the ultimate feared event, it helps us learn faster. So another example they used was a smoker example. You don't have to quit smoking. You don't have to have a massive heart surgery to quit smoking. All you need is like a minor, I think it said minor heart attack, and that should be enough to stop the smoking. A major instance of slow learning for our society is the nuclear destruction. Since no one experienced the destruction of humanity, it is difficult to learn from this shock. No one's fully experienced it, so we often feel like, because nobody went through it, then we're not going to go through it, and they continue to make these instruments of mass destruction. And because we haven't fully learned from this, the threat is still alive as long as they keep being produced. So this continues into this slide. Because we went so long without such a shock, the horrors of Hiroshima and Nagasaki fails to remind us of what can occur as a result of nuclear destruction. Another example of slow learning is the attitude that we are indestructible. It can't happen to me. This is a result of infrequent and delayed shocks that decrease the effectiveness of contingencies. So one example I thought of is it can take years for lung damage to develop in a smoker. Because the shock is delayed, the person will continue to smoke until it is too late and end up getting a cancer diagnosis. This chapter mentions something called the avoidance paradox. Punishment causes avoidance, takes a lapse, and then there is a resumption of punishment to keep the avoidance going. And that's what the avoidance paradox is. And this paradox creates a difference for negative reinforcement by avoidance and positive reinforcement. So for avoidance, success breeds failure, behavior decreases until there is another shock which brings the behavior back. Whereas positive reinforcement, the behavior increases because success breeds more of the same. Escape from avoidance. This is the last bit of the chapter. Talks about how escape becomes more reinforcing than avoidance when people learn how to avoid severe punishment. So those who are locked up in prisons or mental institutions are physically unable to get out, but find other ways to escape by suicide, murder, and other forms of violence. To escape, sorry for the typo or the missing word. So we as a society must consider how harmful it is to have these environments. They're very inhumane. When we create these environments that allow those confined in it to find violent ways to escape, our decisions of putting them there and letting them escape in their own harmful way affects their way of life and determine whether they live or die or if their lives have peace or meaning. So we have to be very conscious and very considerate of these things. So ignorance of the behavioral law is no excuse. So did anything in this chapter stand out to you or make you realize something that you should have known but didn't pick up on? For me, it was the waiting until it hurts. I didn't realize how our health, I didn't realize how much avoidance is going on in our health system. We constantly go to the doctor when we're sick, when we have a cold, when we're having any sort of symptom. We're waiting until it hurts and then we go to the doctor, which is something I've never realized before because we don't base our health system around prevention, which is what it should be. It's around cures. So we only seek medical attention when there is already something wrong, as opposed to preventing it in the first place. So that was my bit that stood out to me. Okay, thanks for watching, guys.